Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Mexico Open Initial Research Show. Hopefully you had a successful Zurich Classic if you decided to wager and or play in any DFS contests. It is good to be back. A mildly relaxing week off for yours truly. You got some personal matters taken care of that I needed to before my vacation this week. I myself did not play any DFS, play or make any wagers. It was a full week off. Just took some time away, played a little bit of golf. Like I said, just took care of a lot of things outside of the stream. So I want to hear from you all. How was your Zurich Classic? Did you happen to play any contests? Did you make any wagers? All of that good stuff. But we are moving to Mexico. We are in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, which for you all of you non-geography buffs, that is on the west coast of Mexico, directly west from Guadalajara. We're on the Pacific Ocean. So see, kids, we're not just gambling. We're also learning some stuff. But yeah, we are on the west coast of Mexico, the second annual Mexico Open. Your defending champion, John Rahm. We have a little bit to get into. I'm not sure how long the show is going to be tonight. There's a couple of things missing, and since there's only 1 year of data, it's not going to take too terribly long to get through. But let's get through what we have. So, all statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where all week I was active on Twitter doing my 3-up, 3-down for Major League Baseball. A pretty successful week, I think. Had a couple of perfect innings, all 6 recommendations coming through earlier this week. Today was an unmitigated disaster, but such is the way things work here over at Calls. But if you're interested in seeing my daily MLB picks for DFS, give me a follow over there. Twitter is also where I post my betting cards week after week. If I would have had any wagers for the Zurich Open or Zurich Classic, would have had it on Twitter. Didn't make any wagers, but I will certainly have a betting card this week for the Mexico Open. So if you want to see that, then give me a follow over there. That will be out Tuesday evening, more than likely. Maybe Wednesday, not sure yet. We'll see what happens with the odds and such. But if you want to see my betting card week after week, you need to follow over Twitter. Twitter and Instagram both is where I place all of my research that I find throughout the week for the golf contests or golf tournament of the week. So there will definitely be something out tomorrow, both on Twitter and on Instagram, for the Mexico Open. Again, with only 1 year of data, I have went and gathered some, the form of the players that finished in the top 10, the top 5 last year. So I'm going to be doing a lot of research tomorrow and seeing if we can find any commonalities between all the players that finished high at Vedanta last year. And speaking of that research, if you want to see the in-depth research that I do, give me a follow over at Twitch, which that link is in the description as well. This is where I do all of my in-depth research, much more laid back, listen to some music with no Zurich Classic stats to gain. Generally, we'll take a look back at my mixed condition models, my lineups on Mondays, and I can give you a look at at my process, how I do things, and then reset for the upcoming week. But with none of that, we can just jump straight into the research tomorrow over on Twitch, which is what I'm planning on doing. So if you want to see that, give me a follow over at Twitch. And then finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. Again, want to hear from you all. How was your Zurich Classic. How was your week in general? Being a week away, or stepping away for a week. I haven't heard from much of the community except for those who reached out on social media. Hopefully you've had a good week. What are you looking forward to with the Mexico Open? How low do you think Jon Rahm's odds are going to be? Again, with him being the defending champion, there are only 3 players in the top 50 in the OWGR in this tournament this week. As of now, it's Jon Rahm, Tony Finau, and Alex Noren. So how low do you think his odds are going to be? Do you think he's going to be 3-1, 2-1? We'll see. What statistics do you think are going to play early, or for this week? Any players that you're looking at early on this week? All of that good stuff. Jump in chat, and of course, if you were a winner this past week, I definitely want to hear from you. So jump in chat with any successful wagers and DFS contests you entered this past week. But we are here for the Mexico Open, so let's do our initial research for the 2023 Mexico Open. And a little bit of a different start, and that's partly due, or mainly due, to the fact that there is no GCSA tournament fact sheet, at least not yet. There wasn't one last year. I do not know if there will be one, but we do have enough data to give you an idea on what the course is going to be like in Fantasy National. So with no GCSA tournament fact sheet, we'll jump straight to Fantasy National here. Look at the players in the field this week. Again, the aforementioned defending champion Jon Rahm, Tony Finau, Alex Noren is the other top 50 player in the OWGR. He's not even in the top 25 here in terms of strokes gained total in 2023. You have Wyndham Clark, who was knocking on the door for his first win in the team event. Of course, the champions of the Zurich Classic, both Nick Hardy and Davis Riley, are here this week at Vedanta. A couple other names here. Nikolai Højgaard, a prominent player on the DP World Tour, seems to be coming over stateside a little bit more. Gary Woodland, Maverick McNeely. So a slightly less than optimal field, I guess is the best way to put it. Not the strongest field, but certainly nothing to the effect of an alternate field strength. You do have a decent set of players here. So without too much more rambling on, let's just go ahead and look at Vedanta from a Fantasy National course breakdown, scorecard, course breakdown, graphical view here. And I didn't, or forgot to bring up the official yardage. I will bring up Pro Visualizer, and we're not going to go through hole by hole. We saw Vedanta last year. Not a whole lot has changed, but I do want to get an idea of the yardage. So on Pro Visualizer, you see here it is listed at 7,300 yards. I think it's actually longer than this, but for this evening, we'll have to go with this 7,300 yard marker. So we'll go with 7,300. I think it plays a little bit longer than this, but just for an idea for this evening, and hopefully there's a GCSA tournament fact sheet tomorrow, we'll get more of a look at that. But what I can tell you, guaranteed, that these surfaces, or these greens, are past Palom. These fairways are pretty easy to hit. The rough is kept short. Just think of a typical Caribbean style event. Your places like the Puerto Rico Open, Corrales, even the Mayakoba, which is on the other side of the country, with Mayakoba and El Camaleon being on the Atlantic side. This is on the Pacific side, but still, these Caribbean style events past Palm Greens, pretty easy to hit fairways, not a lot of rough. Just think of that style of course and play style. So Vedanta, like I said, I think it's going to play longer than 7,300 yards, but according to Pro Visualizers, that is what we have. The reason I think it plays longer, you do have 2 par 5s that measure above 600 yards. You've got a 585, and you've got a couple of par 4s that are really, really long, 498, 496, and a 520. So again, I want to, if memory serves, this was longer than 7,300 yards, but that's where we're at working with tonight in the initial research show. One of the first things I like to do with looking at the scorecard, look at the 9th and 10th most difficult holes, see where par falls. You see the 10th most difficult hole is right at par. This would signify an average scoring difficulty tournament, and that is exactly what it was last year. And again, a reminder, this has only been on the PGA Tour 1 year. Its inaugural event was last year when Jon Rahm won. So returning to Vedanta for the 2nd year. Only 1 year of data that we can collect. It played to average for the first 3 rounds last year and then played easy for the 4th round. So it did play average overall in terms of difficulty. You did have a bunch of easy holes. In fact, the easiest hole was the drivable par 4 7th, played to 2/3 of a shot under par. A very good eagle chance. In fact, the hole before it, the par 5 6th, yielded an eagle at 3%. It played to 4/10 under par. You had the 18th, which played a half a shot under par. So lots and lots of good scoring opportunities. However, don't mistake that for the fact that there are some very difficult holes here. The par 4 10th played to 4/10 over par. You see a double bogey percentage at 8%. It's probably one of the highest metrics that I've seen in terms of double bogeys. You have, in between 3 and 4/10, a little bit more than a quarter of a shot, a third of a shot over par, 2/10 of a shot over par. So as much as you are gaining strokes on these very easy holes, 4/10, 2/3 of a shot, 3/10, 4/10, half a shot, it is balanced out by the fact that you have some holes where double bogey comes into play very, very quickly. Again, we talked about the length. The par 5s are very, very long, with the exception of the 18th. But the par 5 6th, 603 yards, 637, 585 is not short by any means. And you got several long par 4s as well. 505, 520, 498, 496. But you also have some very short, the drivable par 4 7th. I saw another one that was pretty darn short, 415, the opening hole, 415. So a good mix, a really, really good mix of short and long holes here at Vedanta. For the players that finished in the top 10 last year, you had strokes gained approach at about 1 stroke or one per round, 0.95 for putting, 0.95 for off the tee. The big thing here, the around the green is just not a factor. Not a factor. These greens are pretty massive. And with it playing just to average and maybe even slightly on the easier side, we'll look at the driving distance. It was long. Around the green just wasn't a big deal last year, especially for your top performers. Now, if we were to come down to, say, the top 20s, you see the bar actually does start to be at least noticeable. But for your upper echelon finishes, top 10s, the around the green, just not a factor. Top fives, again, around the green does make an appearance, but look at this off the tee metric, the off the tee numbers. Almost one shot on off the tee, it actually overtakes strokes gained approach. And then for your winners, off the tee was the most important factor. And again, this is getting skewed a little bit. It's only 1 year, so small sample size matters. But the off the tee was a huge factor last year for Jon Rahm, as it is usually for him. But even so, even your players that were in the top 5, they were more off the tee than they were approach. So the overwhelming takeaway, I believe, is that this is just a ball striking course. It's a ball striking course. You can really see that in the top 10s with no around the green here. Ball striking almost doubling. In fact, I think it is doubling the short game. And then as you move up the leaderboard from the top 10s to the top 5s to the winner, off the tee becomes that much more paramount. Moving to strokes gained by hole by par, you see the par 5s, the 4s, and then the 3s were the least for the players that finished in the top 10. Top 5s, par 3s really do catch up to the par 4s, but the par 5s are still where your upper echelon finishes, where they're gaining their strokes on the field. And then the winners, it's just a massive amount in these par 5s. And again, just like with off the tee, we're going to have to put that small sample size moniker on everything. But with only 1 year of data, that's what we have to go with. It looks like par 5s are extremely important here at Vedanta. And the par 3s actually are carrying some weight as well, since they are outweighing the par 4s for your top 5s and your winner from last year. So if we take a look, again, no surprise that the par 5s are the leading strokes gained. You've got your 15th, 17th, 14th, and 16th most or easiest holes, or difficult hole, however you want to phrase that. Your easiest hole is that drivable par 4. And then sandwiched in here is a par 3 at 170 that actually plays under par as well. But the rest of the par 3s played fairly difficult. Again, 100th over par, so right at par. But then on the front 9, you had 400ths, and then the very difficult 17th, which was a quarter of a shot over par. So if you are able to get par on these par 3s, you're gaining ground on the rest of the field. At least that was what was happening last year. All right, let's move on to the hole composition. Par 3s we just kind of looked at. 2 very short par 3s in between 150 and 175. Do have a fairly long 200 to 225, and then one in the middle. The drivable, let's see, is there 5 par 3s? That would, how in the world is it a par, saying it's a par 73? So you got 1 here, 2, 3, yeah, so listed as 5 par 3s. Joey, good evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. How was the week? I know we've stayed in touch a little bit throughout the week, but hopefully you had a good week with me being away from the computer, if you will. Don't think you played any Zurich, but if you did, how did it go? And all that good stuff. Thanks for jumping in chat. So it's really throwing me off that the Pro Visualizer listed this as a par 73 when this is showing a par 71 with 5 par 3s. So hopefully the GCSIA tournament fact sheet is out tomorrow. We'll clear that up for us. But last year we had a par 71 set up with at least 1 par 3 in each range, and then 2 very short ones. Again, we have the drivable par 4, is it 9th? I'm going to have to cheat. The drivable par 4 7th at 297. So 1 drivable par 4, 2 fairly short par 4s, and then the majority of our holes, again, only 4 of them though, in between 450 and 5. You do have 2 long par 4s that measure over 500, And the length of the course comes in these par 5s. A short one, the par 5 18th, only 548. But then 500 to 6, or 550 to 600 as one, and then two that measure over 600. Approach shot distribution. Again, this is why I think this course is going to play longer than the stated 7,100 yards that it said on Pro Visualizer. 40+% of your approach shots came from 200 plus. Now, of course, all of the par 5s are getting attacked, so factor that in as well. But so many of your approach shots, ooh, sorry, that was my ice maker. So many of these approach shots, 498, that's going to demand close to a 200 plus. 496 is going to demand a 200 plus. There's a decent chance the 475 will. 505, 520, all of these holes are going to demand a 200 plus approach. So we'll look and see, especially tomorrow night in the Data Dive show, if 200 plus was a big factor in terms of upper leaderboard success. But early on, we're going to be looking at 200 plus for proximity and approach shot. Cut line, again, with only 1 year, no kind of graph to follow. It's just a single dot at -1, but cut last year was -1. Again, that would signify an average scoring event. And that's going to belie a little bit of this scoring distribution chart. 21.5% birdies. A lot of birdie opportunities. Again, we'll scroll back up. There are plenty of good scoring opportunities here. You got eagle rates near 4%, right at 3%, but birdie rate at 62%, 43, 42%, more than 50%. There are good scoring chances here. That's why you have a lot of birdies, and you actually have an amount of eagles. However, this doubles bar is actually fairly fairly large. Not a lot of bogeys, a few, but this doubles bar is pretty big. So when you factor in all of these, it's going to add up to an average scoring difficulty. A little bit more on the easier side with all the birdies, but again, there are plenty of places where double bogey comes in very, very quickly. 8.5%, 6.5% double bogey rate, 5.5% double bogey rate. There are lots and lots of double bogeys to be had on this course. Driving accuracy, right at tour average, or slightly higher, but again, that's a little bit misleading. These fairways are generally fairly easy to hit. They're pretty wide. Now, if you are off the fairway, you do get into trouble quickly in terms of there's jungle around here. You also have, I believe, some of the course runs along the ocean. So it's not like the Corrales in the Puerto Rico where you can be offline by a lot and still playable. If you are missing the fairway, you're going to get into trouble. But these fairways are pretty wide, so it's hard to miss them. And you'll see the accuracy right at tour average, even slightly higher. But look at the distance. 296 plus. The average tour event's 283. You're averaging 13 more yards per drive, and you're still hitting fairways at a consistent clip. These fairways are pretty easy to hit. Even though the course is long, the greens are easy to hit compared to the tour average. Again, these greens are pretty darn large, so that's not going to be a big factor, I don't think. And players are about as successful scrambling here at Vedanta than they are at the average tour event. 3 putts per round, again, right at the average tour event. Distance we looked at, and then proximity. This will really highlight the enormous greens. 37 feet, if you are hitting the green in regulation, is the average proximity, versus 29 feet at the average tour event. So these greens are large. So I'm thinking we're going to be looking at proximity as opposed to just greens in regulation. And then your distance of birdie putts, this is a pretty massive jump from here in Vedanta, which is the blue bar, to the average tour event in red. So it's about 6% more. Again, this is probably your eagles and your very good approaches on these very short par fours, or maybe even the drivable par four where you're two putt birdieing, all that stuff. But there's a look at Vedanta from a scorecard and graphical view. And again, I'm hoping the GCSA tournament fact sheet for Vedanta will be out tomorrow. There wasn't one last year. If not, I will try to find the official scorecard. I'm pretty sure this is a par 71 with 5 par 3s. So keep that in mind. All right, before we go to the player tab, let's take a look at the conditions from last year. Again, first 3 rounds were average, and then the 4th round was easy. Greens were firm. They're paspalum, as you would expect on Caribbean-style events. Paspalum is prevalent at the Puerto Rico, at the Corrales, at Mayakoba, and even some stateside. Kiowa Island has paspalum, where the PGA was a couple years ago. The RSM alternate course is paspalum green. So we're starting to see a few more paspalum surfaces on the PGA Tour. The hitting fairways, you see, they were easy the first 2 rounds. Rough length, short, again, just probably what you should expect in these Caribbean-style events. I did take a quick look at the wind. There does not appear to be any wind in the forecast, but we will update that tomorrow on the Data Dive show. But there's a look at the 1-year tournament conditions that we had at Vedanta. We'll move back to the player tab for this year's Mexico Open. First thing I want to do, I don't think I want to look at scoring easy to par, just because 3 of the rounds were average. And I as much as I want to look at over 7,400, the Pro Visualizer had it at 7,300, 7,315 to be exact. So probably nothing to look at with that either. So instead, we saw that off the tee was such a huge factor as you rose on the leaderboard. Let's just take a look at our top off the tee players coming into this week. Hey, Darnell. Thanks for jumping in chat. Did you play any Zurich Classic? If you did, how did you do? Thanks for coming back after the week off. And are you ready for the Mexico Open? I am certainly itching. My palms are itching after having a week off with no wagers and no contests having been played. But thanks for jumping in chat. Our top off the tee players in 2023 in the field this week: Luke List, Gary Woodland, Aaron Rye, Carson Young, MJ Duffy, Stefan Yeager, John Rahm, Garrick Higo, Austin Eckroat, and James Hahn. No Zurich will be playing Mexico. See, that's the same. I generally take the Zurich Classic off. I know I did last year. I did obviously this year. It's probably going to be more of the same moving forward, or God willing, I still have the show and all that moving forward. But I like the Zurich from a fan standpoint, but as an analyst, as a statistical person, it's a nightmare. So I just throw my hands up and forget it. But there's a look at our top off the tee players, and again, we saw how important that was throughout the breakdown as we rose up the leaderboard. Something else that we can take a look at, we'll have to expand the timeline, absolutely, but let's take a look at some paspalum performance. And I'm going to go back to 2021, see how many rounds we can gather. It's not going to be many. Yeah, see, so Bryce Garnett's got 24. And really the only putting we're going to have is from last year's Mexico Open. But we can get us at least a sense on strokes gained total. It's not going to be a great indicator. It's definitely not something I'm going to use in the mixed condition model or anything to that effect, but it does give you an idea of who plays these style of courses well. So since the beginning of 2021, your top total performers on Paspalum, not just putting, total performers on Paspalum have been Alex Smalley, Brandon Wu, Nate Lashley, Akshay Bhatia, Nico Echeverria, David Lipsky, Ryan Brim, Harry Hall, Nikolai Højgaard, and John Rahm. And again, Rahm, his 4 rounds are, this win from last year. Tony Finau, his T2 last year. Echeverria, his win at Puerto Rico. Yeah, his win at Puerto Rico. So there are very few rounds. I don't want to put a lot of emphasis on it. It is just for your information or for your knowledge as you begin your research early this week that these players, especially the ones that have double digits in rounds, have at least shown the ability consistently to play Paspalum courses well. We're not going to do anything with Paspalum putting. Again, the only Paspalum putting we have is from the Mexico Open last year. But there's a look at your top total performers on Paspalum. We can probably move on into the tournament history, but just like off the tee, we saw that the par 5s were just so astronomically important. So let me bring the timeline back in, and it's something that I will advocate early on in your research. I'm just making sure I don't have any other filters selected. Is to take a look at your best top or your top par 5 performers, as they are so very important here at Vedanta. Your top par 5 performers in 2023 that are in the field this week: John Rahm, Kevin Chappell, Wyndham Clark, Tony Finau, Chris Stroud, Nate Lashley, Patton Kizzire, Patrick Rogers, Bo Hostler, and Matt Wallace. So give those guys a little bit of extra due diligence, if you will, in your research early on this week, as the par 5s are extremely important here at Vedanta. All right, with that, let's go ahead and move to the tournament history tab, the strokes gained total tab. And again, it's just only from 1 year, but we can at least see who played here last year, how they performed, all of that. So John Rahm, your defending champion. Tony Finau and Brandon Wu, T2. Davis Riley was a solo 5th and now coming off the win at the Zurich with Nick Hardy. Cameron Champ, David Lipsky, Alex Smalley, Patrick Rogers. All of these players were in the top 10. So already you can kind of get a sense of some of the players that really performed well here last year. John Rahm, Tony Finau, Cameron Champ. Alex Smalley is not short off the tee by any means. Davis Riley is not short off the tee by any means. These longer hitters were really, really successful last year in the inaugural Mexico Open at Vedanta. Let's see, players that are in the field this week and didn't play well. I'm trying to go through some notable names. Ricky Barnes, who's had a few decent performances here lately. Austin Smotherman made the cut to a clunker. Kevin Streelman generally plays longer courses well. Surprised to see Wyndham Clark made the cut, didn't play all that well. You would think with driving distance and par 5s being so important, he did not fare well here last year. Let's see, Ben Martin, Colin Taryn. Let's see, anybody? Yeah, so there were a couple of players that were positive. Joseph Bramlett, again, longer hitter. He missed the cut but gained strokes gained total, so just kind of interesting to see that. All right. Again, not much that we can do since there's only 1 year, but figured I would show you what there is from last year. Let's move on over to Microsoft Excel. This will probably be a bit of a shorter show with no GCSA tournament fact sheet, only 1 year of data. But Mexico, compared to other courses, you see off the tee for the players that finished in the top 30 was a significant portion of the success. 60% more important. Now, this is all small sample size, all that out of the way, disclaimer. Off the tee is still going to be very important. Around the greens, not going to be important. These greens are massive. Distance is going to be a big thing. Hitting fairways seem to be somewhat important against the average full field course. Not sure if that's going to be the case. Again, this is probably just in the fact of having 1 year of data. Interesting to see that bogeys, and especially double bogeys, outweighed gaining birdies. So if we actually look at the detail for this, move over to that, you see the bogey avoidance, even though this course was on the easier end of the spectrum in terms of scoring, it was more important for the players that were in the top 30 to avoid the bogeys, and especially the double bogeys. That is one of the bigger numbers in double bogey avoidance. So perhaps something to pay attention to as well, players that are adept at avoiding the big numbers. Let's look at par 3s, 4s, and 5s. You see the 3s, a 2.23, that's a pretty large number. And in fact, again, just small sample size and all, 53%. The par 3s are going to be a decent factor. There are 5 of them here, after all, at Vedanta. Now, this looks really, really weird, but this is actually true. There was a hole that played 0 to 150, and I think one player bogeyed and one player birdied. So that's why it's averaging out to a 0, but that is a legitimate, there is data in here. See, the most important ranges were the shorter par 3s, but none of them were, the 150 to 175 was about 40% of the total in par 3s. So it looks like we're going to be focusing on strokes gained par 3 in totality. No specific range is what it's looking like. The par 4s, pretty low number. They were less important than the average full field event. But you see, the longer par 4s are where a lot of the strokes are coming from. 154, 131. Not every course has a par 4 over 500 yards, so I would not get too caught up in this number here. Again, like the Colonial, Muirfield, TBC River Highlands, these places don't have a 500 plus par 4, so that number is quite skewed. But, oh gosh dang it, wrong tab. But they are certainly prevalent here. So we're going to want to look at these longer par 4s as we move throughout the week. And again, tomorrow in the Data Dive show, we'll see if there's a range that really led to upper end success. But it looks like it could be just another set of strokes gained par 4, considering this is, again, about 40 to 45% of the strokes gained total. So it's not even making up half. Par 5s, surprisingly, this number is less than the total for the par 3s. Remember, the par 3s was a 2.2. The par 5s was is a 1.6. Now the the vision's going to be skewed again. I apologize, but remember, I'm collecting for the top 30, and this is showing the winners. I'll bring it to the top 10s. I'm going to have to unskew the vision, it looks like. But you can see, once I unskew the vision, how important the par 5s are here. This is for the top 10s. And again, as you move up the leaderboard, the par 5s just continue to gain in importance. John Rahm dominated them last year. So I'm gaining top 30. That's why it's a little different than what we saw in Fantasy National. But par fives are going to be an important factor. Again, it doesn't look like there was a specific range that played the most. They're all pretty equal here. So that's a little bit of the difficulty with only 1 year of data. So we'll see if we can't find some tangents or some areas where we think we can exploit and try to gain an advantage over our fellow contestants. There doesn't appear to be a particular length of par 5 that matters the most either. Moving to the proximity, we saw that 42% of the approach shots came from 200 plus, and it is the highest of these numbers. Windy conditions. It was last year. Now, I did look at Wind Finder about an hour or so before the show, Darnell, and I did not see any wind. But again, we are 3.5 days, ahead of, or away from the tournament. So that is liable to change. But as of now, I did not see any. But I didn't put a whole lot of emphasis into it anyway. We will update that tomorrow in the Data Dive show. We'll take a look at Wind Finder, and hopefully the GCSA tournament fact sheet will be out tomorrow as well. But you can see, and this is why I truly think this course is going to be longer than the Pro Visualizer stated 7,300 yards. These longer approach shots are what took precedent last year. You see, the total procs actually is not a very big number at all. Total procs, if that number was regulated throughout like 3 or 4 years, that procs total is a very, very low number. The upper end of our proximities are where most important compared to the average full field course. So we're going to be probably looking at that, especially tomorrow in the Data Dive show. And then I pointed this out. I pointed it out for the 0 to 5, but that 5 to 10 number is also very, very massive. A massive number in that strokes gained putting 5 to 10 feet. So the short putts are where the top 30 really made their advantage, or gained their advantage on the greens last year. This is in these 0 to 5, 5 to 10, maybe even a little bit to 10 to 15 feet putts. But there's a look at Vedanta and the 1 year of data we have from last year for the players that finished in the top 30. We'll finish it off with the early look file. Again, just 1 year, but it's always good to see how players fared in what sense and what statistic last year. You see just the prevalence of off the tee. Anybody who finished, we'll go in the top, top 32. I'm going to say top 30, just understand it's the top 32. So Hank Lebiota here at 29th. Top 30. All right. This number is a 2.1. I mean, it's a big number. You only had one player that was negative in terms of off the tee. That was in the top 15 or so. Just a big, big factor. Now, David Lipsky gained all of his in the approach. Tony Finau was very good with his irons. He didn't make any putts. But you see the prevalence of players that were negative around the green. It was not a big thing last year. It just wasn't. It was all in your ball striking, and if you were making putts, you were rising up the leaderboard as any other tournament. But it's all in the ball striking. All in the ball striking. Preferably in both, but as long as you had one, like Lipsky was superb in irons and was okay with off the tee. Brandon Wu was very good with both. Finau was excellent in one and very good on another. Smalley was great in both. We move across and we'll take a look at driving distance. Now, Finau, surprisingly, Finau was actually negative in relation to the field. But, Cameron Champ and John Rahm, even Brandon Wu was long for this course last year. Davis Riley, Alex Smalley. Distance is going to be a pretty big thing. I think greens is going to be a little bit misleading because these greens are so big. Let's take a look at the scoring. Again, it was a little surprising to see that bogeys were so far outweighing the birdies. But look here, of the players that are in the field again this year, your top 3 all were in bogey avoidance. Now, Davis Riley was all in the birdies, but he was still positive in bogey avoidance. But a bigger percentage of your players were more favored in the bogey avoidance than they were in the birdies gained in the upper part of the leaderboard last year. So do take that in mind as you begin your research this week. Par 3s, not a whole lot. I mean, like I said, John Rahm played them, well. But 5.1 was the biggest number here from Martin Trainer. You had a couple of 4.1s fairly high. Again, this is going to look weird, but you had a few guys that made a birdie on that one hole, a few guys that made bogey, and it averages out to a 0. It looks like consistently the most important range was the 150 to 175 in the par 3s, but there's not a lot here. I'll be anxious and curious to see how it looks in terms of a leaderboard tomorrow on the Data Dive show, but looks like just par 3s. Par 4s, okay. Again, these longer par 4s are seemingly where it's at. John Rahm wasn't spectacular at the par 4s. He was good, but he wasn't spectacular. Tony Finau was very good. Smalley, Lashley, Patrick Rogers. And again, look where they're doing most of their damage. Like Rogers is in the longer par 4s. Brandon Wu's in the longer par 4s. Finau's just good at them all last year. Smalley, mainly the 450 to 5. Yep. So there's the par 4s. And then par 5s. A couple of bigger numbers up here. Tony Finau actually didn't play the par 5s well last year, or what you would expect Tony Finau to do on par 5s. Davis Riley did, John Rahm, Brandon Wu, Lipsky, Champ. Okay, last thing, I'll just take a look at the proximity quickly. Surprisingly, yeah, I mean, look here, the 200 plus, you had some pretty poor performances in the 200 plus. So that's why I always like to go through, usually I say prior leaderboards, but prior leaderboard last year for the Data Dive. Be curious to see how this shakes out in terms of when you sort on the 200 plus and when you sort on the leaderboard. So that's what I have for you for an initial research show. A little bit shorter, but again, with only 1 year, not a whole lot of historical data to look at. But a reminder for the schedule this week. Tonight, obviously the initial research. Tomorrow will be the Data Dive show, per usual. Tuesday evening will be the DFS Tactics show, as I will be leaving on vacation early Wednesday morning. So I will be in the same boat as you are. I will be filling in my lineups on Tuesday evening. So I will give you the updated... I'll update the wind for you again tomorrow, but Tuesday night will be the DFS Tactics show. I will have to give you the most up-to-date wind and give you the updated projected ownerships per Tuesday night. So it'll be a night early, but again, I'll be going on vacation, so I'll be giving you what I can. But do set your reminders, your notifications. Tuesday night will be the DFS Tactics. But thanks to Joey and Darnell for jumping in chat. Really appreciate it. Hey, you didn't lose anything this week by not playing the Zurich. So we are ready to move on into Mexico and try to build try to build our bankroll for a little bit. Reminder that if you are interested in baseball content, I am putting that out every day over on Twitter. My top 3 players that I like and dislike. And then tomorrow I will be doing research for the Mexico Open. So be on the lookout for that over on Twitter and on Instagram. So for all of the wagers that you made this past week at the Zurich Classic, for all the DFS contests you played this past week at the Zurich Classic, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive Show, may all your bets be profitable.